Good evening. It's 6 o'clock on Friday, May 20th, 2016. Welcome and thank you for joining us tonight for the English edition of Aura News, where we bring you today's top stories translated into English every weeknight. The Central Election Commission approved publicizing the lists of officials who have filled out the self-declaration form today. The chairwoman of the Central Election Commission declared that the delay to make the list public stemmed from some uncertainties within the law, indirectly criticizing those who prepared the law, which does not clearly define whether a publication violates privacy or not. The Central Election Commission sanctioned publicizing the list, reasoning that the people who filled out the form gave their approval by signing the form. Meanwhile, the Democratic Party's legal representation declared that the Central Election Commission violated the law by not making the list public within the legal deadline. The Ad Hoc Commission for Justice Reform gathered today where the Democratic Party presented its proposals for the reform. The majority members have not accepted the DP's proposals, believing them to return the reform work back to the beginning. The vice chairman of the Ad Hoc Commission declared that their proposals for the Council of Appointments in the justice system and the preservation of the constitutional mandates of all the officials after the vetting process did not receive support in the Ad Hoc Commission. Meanwhile, the Socialist MP Maiko did not speak of any stalemate, but rather he invited the opposition to reflect until Monday and to accept the changes they have agreed on so far, changes which have been adopted in principle by all members of the Commission. Today, the opposition made some proposals that would return the work on the reform to the beginning. I hope the Democratic Party reflects until Monday. Today, the Democratic Party presented yet another stance on the Council of Appointments, proposing the elimination of the Council. I hope the opposition ends this narrative. If we do not adopt the judicial reform, we will be ranked among the states that have failed. Without the reform, the doors of integration will be closed for Albania, declared the Socialist MP, hoping that the necessary consensus will be found. The Ad Hoc Commission discussed the last chapters of the reform relating to the transitory provisions and the evaluation of judges. The debate over the new proposals of Democratic Party would seem to delay the adoption of the judicial reform. Mr. Newt Fleckenstein, a member of the European Parliament, gave an exclusive interview to Aura News where he affirmed that the judicial reform is a necessity for Albania, that the political class must adopt it if integration into the EU is expected. More than 90% of the people want the judicial reform, Mr. Fleckenstein said, but I'm not sure if they understand what is happening with the justice reform in detail. They feel that changes to the justice system are a necessity. Corrupt judges must be removed. They know that judicial reform is the basis for all other reforms. Therefore, they, the people, have the right to ask politicians to adopt the reform. Concerning the Democratic Party's new draft for the justice reform, Fleckenstein said, much depends on the content of the draft. If the draft is the same as the official draft, containing only some small changes, then there is no problem. But if the draft has substantial changes, then I do not understand this new attitude. Regarding the politicians, Fleckenstein said, I hope that the politicians will be brave enough to listen to their voters and not only to a few people who do not want the reform. He also expressed his hope that the reform will be adopted on time. The Democratic Party chairman held a meeting today with the members of the Parliamentary Commission of Stabilization and the Association EU-Albania. After the meeting, the Democratic Party chairman declared that continued political dialogue is needed concerning the opposition's recommendations for the judicial reform. Mr. Basha reiterated that the opposition supports a justice reform that stops organized crime and corruption and not one that defends the gangs that are related to the state. The Democratic Party chairman accused the government of failing to implement the law. The Democratic Party has a coherent and transparent stance before the citizens and the internationals, he said. The DP has made its proposals, which have been accepted by the Venice Commission, which are now in a draft. We have offered a proposal and we are waiting for political dialogue before adopting the justice reform. The biggest concern that I raised today is the implementation of the law. The government fails to implement the laws. The government and the Prime Minister have proved that they are connected to crime. I asked during this session of the Committee for the Implementation of the Law, said the DP chairman. In a meeting to coordinate, the ruling coalition, Ilir Meta and Edi Rama, met with the heads of the Socialist Party and the Socialist Movement for Integration parliamentary groups. After the meeting, the chairman of the Socialist Parliamentary Group declared that there are no problems in the ruling coalition and that the parties are on the same page concerning the two main reforms. We discussed both the judicial and electoral reforms. The majority supports the commissions for the reforms. The majority is willing to progress with the reforms. The ruling coalition is functioning in the best way possible, and there are no debates. The presence of both party chairmen in the meeting shows this, said the head of the Socialist Parliamentary Group, inviting the opposition not to delay the adoption of the judicial reform. The head of the Socialist Movement for Integration agreed, declaring that there is no more time to waste for the judicial reform. We are facing a major transformation, he said. We share the same vision regarding the judicial reform and, in process, the electoral reform, and they are about to be concluded. The Socialist Movement for Integration held a critical position after the video scandal of Dibra's former mayor, but the head of the Socialist Parliamentary Group declared that elections in Dibra were not focused on in the meeting today. The Assembly Speaker and the Prime Minister did not make any comments. President of the Republic of Albania, Bujar Nishani, has filed a lawsuit in Tirana court against the mayor. In the lawsuit submitted yesterday, the president asked for compensation from the mayor for moral damages caused. The president is asking for 100 lek from the mayor for the violation of his honor and personality, along with a court directive obligating the mayor to withdraw his statements made in the media. The court is expected to set a date to review the president's request. 42 vocational schools and 10 vocational centers are participating in an Olympiad where they can present their ideas and creative work. 440 young students from vocational schools will present their creative ideas, and 200 of them will be trained to design a business plan. If the project turns out to be successful, the young people will be involved in a special government program for establishing new businesses. The government believes that the only solution for matching the supply and demand in the labor market is to establish a healthy system of vocational education. Prime Minister Edi Rama considered vocational education to be the best solution to fight unemployment. He added that the German model is the best one to be followed for vocational education. The Prime Minister clarified, "We have never said that the Albanian people are lazy. We have said that laziness and the easiest way to achieve imaginary successes have been promoted in the recent 20 years. The Minister of Social Welfare called parents to visit the 3-day fair of vocational education and to advise their children to choose if a vocational education is the right alternative for their education. So far, five vocational schools are twinned with Italian schools, and the Minister of Welfare is making efforts for the accreditation of the vocational schools' diplomas in European countries." That's all for our English edition this evening. Please join us again Monday through Saturday at 6 p.m. for your local news in English. My name is Mari, and on behalf of Aura News, thank you and good night.